Okay, so good morning and thank you everybody for joining us this morning. I'm Lisa, I'm Head of Marketing at Torchbox and we're really pleased to have you all here with us today. So we're going to talk about a challenge that so many organisations face, which is breaking down those pesky silos that can be created so that we can have an effective unified strategy. It's something that can hold us all back and it can be really frustrating, but we are going to hear from a couple of experts today who will share their experiences and learnings. So we are delighted to have Amy Hughes with us, who's the Head of Digital at MND Association. Amy leads the digital function and is deeply passionate about supporting people living with and affected by motor neurone disease, and she has some fantastic insights to share. And we're also joined by Iona Twiston Davies, a Senior Digital Account Manager at Torchbox, and she helps all of our charity clients to raise funds, engage new supporters, and promote their services to the people who need them the most. And together, Amy and Iona have been working on MND Association's digital strategy with a much wider team, not just the two of them, but they're here to share it today. And so they are going to talk about what's worked and also what hasn't worked as well in creating a more unified digital approach. So there's going to be lots of information to take away. I am recording the webinar, so I will share it with you in an email afterwards. So you don't need to frantically scribble notes if you don't want to. Live transcript is also enabled if you'd like to use it, so you'll be able to access that from the Zoom navigation. We are really keen to hear your questions as well. So please do use the Q&A function, so it will help me to keep track of them, which is available from the Zoom nav as well. We're going to save all the questions and ask them to Amy and Iona live at the end. So we're not going to be answering them throughout or interrupting them. We have got plenty of time after the presentation to ask them, so keep them coming through. And I think that's about all from me. So I am going to hand over to Amy.
Thank you, Lisa. Lovely. So to kick off, I thought I'd give a quick introduction into who we are as the Motor Neurone Disease Association. And forgive me, because I've still got a little bit of a hangover of a cough, so I'll try and mute myself when I'm coughing. So for those of you who don't know, motor neurone disease is a fatal, rapidly progressing disease that affects the brain and spinal cord. And it attacks the nerves that control movement so that muscles no longer work. And what that means is that it's a disease that can leave people feeling trapped inside a failing body, unable to move, unable to talk, swallow, and eventually breathe. MND takes everything and it kills a third of people within 1 year. Each day, 6 people are diagnosed with MND, and today 6 more people will die from MND. So it's a disease that currently has no cure and very, very limited treatments that are available to people living with the disease. So the Motor Neurone Disease Association is the leading charity for everyone living with and affected by MND in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And we're improving access to the best care and support for everyone living with and affected by MND. We're raising awareness of the disease and campaigning to improve the lives of people living with MND, their families and their carers. And we're investing records amount into research to lead us to new understandings about the disease and bring us one step closer to finding a cure for MND. We've been working with Torchbox now for almost 5 years, and they help us to achieve some of these objectives through our digital marketing. So Iona is going to talk a little bit more about some of the ways in which they support us.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, so we've been supporting Motor Neurone Disease Association with our sort of paid search and social media activity. That's across all the platforms you might expect: Google, Microsoft, Meta. We also do Google Ad Grants Management, of course. SEO support, so that includes both technical visibility and also content design recommendations. Then data and measurement support, that's a big part of our work together, and that's everything from like setting up cookie banners on various main website microsites through to making a measurement plan for the digital activity. And then we've also recently introduced a new project which involves user research, information architecture, and content design. So really a big variety of disciplines that we're bringing together in our digital strategy. But it hasn't always been smooth sailing. About a year ago, MND Association were undergoing some internal consultancy, and we were reviewing the digital activity and looking at the issues that we were facing. And so some of the ones that came up were poor visibility of digital marketing outside of the sort of core group of people who are working with us on a day-to-day basis. Amy, would you be able to speak about that a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, I think in particular here we were thinking about how we could make more senior stakeholders in the organisation aware of the importance of digital and some of the ways in which it was supporting the organisation's overarching strategy. So we wanted to make sure that we could find a way that we could make digital more visible to those senior stakeholders.
Yeah, and I think some of the things that were exacerbating those issues with visibility were limited tracking setup. Digital marketing was being considered quite late in the planning process. We were quite often getting briefs in like just a week, 2 weeks before the go live date. And the consequence of that was that we were running quite simple campaigns without really being able to do a lot of complex testing and working quite reactively. And similarly to that, we were also quite limited in our budgets. And we sort of fed that back that compared to organizations of similar size, the budgets weren't what we would expect to see. And the sort of overarching issue that we were facing with our strategic work was that we didn't have a clear plan for the next 6 to 12 months. We were working on a campaign by campaign basis, or just set up this bit of tracking, or just review this SEO page. And yeah, but Lisa, I think we have a poll, don't we, about these issues?
We do have a poll, so I'm going to launch it now. I've got a little bit of interactivity. So let us know if you've experienced any of these issues, or if you're currently experiencing any of them. You can answer multiple ones if you like to. So we've got poor internal visibility of digital marketing, so the understanding and impact of paid media, SEO and analytics. Limited analytics setup, so leading to consistent issues with tracking and the inability to report on impact. Digital marketing being considered too late, so campaigns were briefed much later than we did, with 1 to 2 weeks. Budgets not keeping up with competitors, and also no clear centralized plan for work streams. So let us know if you have experienced one or any of these in the past, or you currently are as well, and then we'll share the results in a minute. It looks like all of them are quite common issues that everyone is facing, with some clear standout winners, with digital marketing being considered too late is a big factor, and no centralized plan as well. I'm going to end the poll there and share the results with you.
Yeah, so it looks like we've got that no clear centralized plan is the winner by a whisker. But very close behind is digital marketing being considered too late in the process. And I feel like those two issues are tied together. Would you agree, Amy?
Yeah, definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah. Oh, well, good to know that we're not alone in facing these issues. And I'm glad that we can sort of be talking through them today and be getting it out in the open like this. So when we sort of talked through those issues together, MND Association came back to us and said, okay, so in order to fix all these problems that we're having, what should we do more of? What should we stop doing? And how can we achieve more, or for the same that we've been investing, or less? And I think pretty much everyone would like to know the answers to those. So how did we approach going about solving these problems and answering these questions? It required a change in strategy. We had to sort of, take a step back, both Torchbox as an agency with our ways of working and MND Association with their ways of working. And the first thing we did was look at internal ownership on the MND Association side. Amy, maybe you could talk a bit more about how you did that?
Yeah, sure. So in the past, our ways of working have meant that there was never a single clear owner of the digital marketing strategy and our ways of working with Torchbox. And we had a situation where different teams were creating their own marketing plans that included digital marketing as a part of it. So when we were having these discussions with Torchbox recommended that we had one central internal owner and somebody responsible for all digital marketing activity. And the idea behind that was to make sure that this one person could help to prioritise the different campaigns that we had running and ensure that whatever we were working on at the time was all aligned with the overarching organisation's roadmap rather than specific team needs. So that was one of the actions that we took away, and we made sure that we had one person accountable for the overall oversight of digital marketing.
Yeah, exactly. But in order to sort of keep all the teams involved and sort of not lose that sense of having a plan for each individual team, we also created a shared digital marketing calendar, which I'll show you an example of here. So this is something that we created collaboratively with MND Association. At the top, we've got a calendar of awareness days, and that includes things like regional roadshows, so internal events at MND Association, national awareness days, deadlines for challenge events, anything that sort of makes a difference to our calendar for the year. And then you can see here we've got a separate line for every like paid media campaign we are planning on running, with when we would like the brief to come through, proper planning periods included, reporting periods. Amy, how has the sort of team reacted to working in this?
I think they found it a really helpful exercise, and it was something that we were very much in need of. The plan was developed based on a lot of campaigns and activities that we run each year. So to be able to start this, it meant that we could just choose the activity that we were already aware of, like awareness days and weeks and challenge events. So a lot of this was quite easy to plot to begin with, because it was things that we already knew were happening. But then we worked with teams across the organisation, so from volunteering through to community fundraising and research. And we used some existing meetings that we had in the diary, which were monthly planning sessions with the team, to ensure that their upcoming priorities were all fed into this same plan. So, for example, on the screen, I know the text is a little bit small, but you might be able to see one on there called MND Guarantee. And that was our general election campaign. That was one of the priorities for our policy and campaigns team. And we also included other activity that was happening across the association, and not just things that we were working with Torchbox on. So that made sure that this plan gave very much a holistic view of all of the activity that was happening throughout the year, to make sure that we were aligning activities and not oversaturating audiences with different asks at the same time. So it really helped to visualize a lot of this for us and really plot when the different milestones were. And this helped us to make sure that we were getting into a better flow of briefing in campaigns at the right time and working in a bit more of a proactive way.
Absolutely. And it's been really good to see that people have continued to use this sheet. People move around their campaigns as and when things change. People add new things. And it isn't just one person who's responsible for updating this sheet. There is a risk that this kind of like can be just like one other spreadsheet of a million spreadsheets that you have to keep updated. But it feels like this document's working really well for us.
Definitely. And I think one of the key things with this is that it's not a static document. It wasn't that we did all of this work up front and then left it. It is something that we make sure that we keep up to date and use it as a living document. And that's how we can get the most value out of it.
Absolutely. Something else that's also on this document are the roadmaps for our SEO activity, our Google Ad Grants activity, and our analytics activity. And like, while not every team will interact directly with these people, and this activity can sort of fade a bit into the background, but having it included within the roadmap for everything else has made a big difference to visibility. And from a Torchbox perspective, it's really helped us with like breaking down our silos between disciplines. If the paid media team checks out what the SEO team's been up to, and we see, oh, they've done some keyword research into Global MND Awareness Day, that'll be really useful when we come to do the paid search activity for Global MND Awareness Day. Or the analytics team can see, there's this paid media campaign coming up. I'll check if they need any tracking, rather than it sort of having to be like getting missed or being briefed in too late. It's sort of all much easier to sort of interact with.
Yeah, and I think from our side of things as well, it's been really helpful because different team members are responsible for some of these different disciplines. So it might be that one person in the team is working with you on SEO, and it's a completely different team member briefing in paid marketing campaigns. So to bring all of this together has been really helpful from our side in terms of our ways of working and awareness as well.
Excellent. And yeah, one of the consequences of having this all planned out is that our planning timelines have gone from maybe 2 weeks beforehand to a minimum of 4 weeks beforehand, much longer for larger, more complicated campaigns. And that's made a huge difference to the type of campaigns we're able to run. We'll show you an example in a minute. But we've also been going beyond just this campaign calendar to looking at projects outside of sort of campaign work or one-off project work. Amy, maybe you'd like to talk through this a bit more?
Yeah, of course. So last year, as an organisation, we started building a strategic work plan of activities for the organisation for 2024. And we started that process by identifying the different work priorities from each department across the association. And then as a digital team, we reviewed all of these work plans and identified some of the key areas that required digital support. So, for example, one of our major projects this year is a CRM project. So we found the different ways in which that we needed to be able to support that project. And we identified various other larger scale projects like Broken Journeys, which is mentioned on this slide, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on in some of the upcoming slides. But what this meant was that we had a roadmap of all of the key priorities for us as a team that we needed to be able to deliver across 2024. And then Torchbox helped us to review this roadmap and identify some of the ways in which they would be able to support us in delivering some of those projects.
Yeah, that was a really good experience in terms of becoming more of a strategic partner and just sort of looking from a like discipline agnostic perspective of, okay, how might human-centered design solve this problem? What could the analytics team do to support? What could we do from an SEO perspective on this problem? And speaking to all of these different teams, and everyone comes up with a different solution to the same problems, and then bringing those together is sort of what makes a digital strategy. And it's been really gratifying to sort of see all the pieces fall into place. We'll give you an example of what that looked like on one of our projects here. So this was the Broken Journeys project. So going back to those issues that we faced at the beginning, we were looking at limited analytics setup. So this project was to address some of the issues we had with sort of how our user journeys were performing. Amy will talk through this in a second, but also it really made a difference to increasing visibility of digital marketing by bringing in stakeholders from teams who don't necessarily think about digital every day. But Amy, maybe you can give us a bit of background on this project.
Yeah, so we identified quite early on that we were very limited in the analytics setup that we had. So generally our main site was set up okay, but we had lots of different journeys that ended up on third-party platforms, and we didn't have that end-to-end tracking in place to be able to see the full user journey. And we also have various different microsites as well. So one of the first steps as part of this project was to make sure that we had the appropriate analytics and tracking in place to have, in the first place, quite a basic level of understanding in terms of how those journeys were performing. But then we went on to do a measurement planning exercise, which Iona, do you want to talk a little bit more about?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we reviewed all the sort of key user journeys we'd identified, donation journey, volunteer sign up, finding research information, lots of different journeys. And then we also held workshops with stakeholders from the teams that sort of owned that section of the website. It's an interesting idea to think about, like someone owning a part of the website, but there are teams that are responsible for different sections. And we're asking, okay, so what problems are we trying to solve with this part of the website? What does a successful outcome of this user journey look like? And how will we know when we've achieved it? And we found these workshops really, really helpful on our side. Amy, how did you find it on your side?
Yeah, I think it was a really useful exercise. I mean, historically, our site was built upon existing structures that we had in place and without any real evaluation into how that content was performing. So the measurement plans are an important first step for us to make sure that the organisation, as well as teams across the organisation, start to think a bit more strategically about the website and how it can meet their aims. So, for example, what's the overall purpose of the content that they have on the website, and what metrics can they track to help show and demonstrate its impact? So I think as we continue to grow and develop as an organisation, these measurement frameworks are going to be a really valuable resource for us to make sure that the decisions that we make are backed by data and insight, rather than assumptions that we make about how things are performing.
Yeah, and here's an example of what one of those measurement plans looks like. Amy, do you want to maybe talk us through sort of what we're looking at here?
Yeah, sure. So appreciate the text on here is a little bit small. So this slide here shows an example of one of the measurement frameworks that we worked on with our fundraising team. So just to briefly explain what's on here, at the top we have an overarching impact goal for that team that we did the measurement plan with. And then that's broken down into 3 separate objectives. And then we listed what the main indicators of success would be and the KPIs that we could measure to help demonstrate that. So that could be things like conversion rate, for example. And then the bottom row there is where we would get that data from. And this was typically Google Analytics a lot of the time, but it also included things like our CRM. Excuse me. And I think one of the challenges that we had with this was that, like many organisations, we struggled to get access to some of this data to help demonstrate the impact that we were making. So I mentioned previously that we're in the process of doing a CRM project, and hopefully that will enable us to tap into some of this data a bit more readily. But we've also had a lot of work to do to make sure that we get that data from Google Analytics, and that our GA4 is set up to track a lot of these new KPIs that we've introduced. So I think one of the things that was interesting about doing these sessions was that the impact goals, so that section in green at the top, varied hugely across teams. So for example, one of the impact goals from our research team was to find a cure for MND, which is obviously massive, and one of the things that we're working towards as an organisation, through to teams like our community fundraising team, whose impact goal here was to support fundraisers through their journey. So it was quite interesting to hear different people's perspectives in terms of what their impact goal for the website would be.
Yeah, and it gives us a really useful insight into how that team thinks about their work, what sort of timescales they're working on, how they're sort of breaking down the jobs that they're trying to do. And something that we did from a Torchbox perspective was I sat in on all of those meetings to sort of make sure that I was spotting opportunities that might come up for paid media or SEO as a result of what people were saying, because obviously we already had an analyst there. And then we also brought in someone from our user research team to sort of soak in all this information, because we knew it would be really useful for the next stage of the activity, which was research and discovery. So yeah, we've reviewed the parts of the website, we've got an idea of what we're trying to achieve with these parts of the website, but we need to make sure that we're meeting user needs as well. So we've conducted a series of in-depth interviews of people with motor neuron disease, their carers, supporters of MND Association, volunteers, researchers, healthcare professionals, and sort of asking them about the problems that they're trying to solve in their life that they might go to this website for. And that was done both through these sort of in-depth in-person interviews, but also surveys going out to a bigger range of people, asking about their needs or how they perform the top tasks that they might do on the website. Also, we brought in other disciplines as well. So that was user research, but we also brought in SEO support with looking at which keywords are bringing people to the site, readability, and doing sort of technical SEO crawl for visibility. And then we also had a content designer look at it in terms of what are the trends that we're seeing in the content types that are showing up on the website at the moment. Amy, how was your sort of experience with this research and discovery stage?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, and one of the steps prior to the interviews with people living with and affected by MND has been to have conversations with a range of stakeholders internally. So we did the measurement planning work, but then we also followed up with conversations with staff ranging from directors who could provide that strategic oversight through to people who are speaking with MND on our helpline, And what we wanted to do was learn a little bit more about their challenges that they have with the website, or what they think some of the opportunities are. So it was really helpful to get that internal perspective, and then follow up reaching out to external audiences as well to validate some of those assumptions. And as an organisation, one of our promises is to make sure that people living with and affected by MND are at the heart of everything that we do. So having a whole phase dedicated to this user research has been vital, really, and make sure that we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, so we're sort of currently in that stage at the moment. We're almost wrapped up with these interviews, but the next stage is going to be bringing all of these learnings that we've got together into recommendations for how we're going to change our content and tailor it to meet these users' needs, recommendations for changes we might make to the site structure, and then mocking that up and testing it with the people who are going to be using it. And then also supporting MND Association's internal team, so creating workflows for the people who are going to be using this information architecture and designing the content, and helping them sort of match the guidelines that we're going to be giving them. Obviously, making changes to a website is also probably going to involve some new tracking that's going to need to be set up. And there's also, we're thinking about how do we stop this being like a one and done project, and what sort of support might the staff need going forwards in terms of training them on a content strategy, or writing for SEO, or like follow up on that training to say, hey, how are you getting on with this sort of thing? Yeah, Amy, anything you would add on that bit?
Yeah, I think just around the importance of that final bullet point there about staff training and follow-up support. So the way that we work as an organisation is that we have subject matter experts across various different areas, so from research through to care. And we have those people trained to be content editors, so they're responsible for updating the content on their areas of the site. So this is something that they do in addition to their day-to-day role. So it's really important that these people understand the content strategy that we've developed, and enabling them to have the skills and the confidence to be able to put some of that into practice so that we can make sure that it's implemented effectively.
Fantastic. Okay, and then we want to talk about another example of the benefits that we've seen from this new way of working when it came to planning a very big campaign, bringing in multiple agencies and sort of really needing a big picture strategy for this work. So the issues, again, we were facing were poor internal visibility of digital marketing. And when we're talking about a big campaign, we wanted to get away from digital marketing being considered late in the process, and also sort of addressing like our levels of spend as well, and sort of looking at what a bigger campaign might look like. And Amy, maybe you could talk us through this opportunity.
Yeah, of course. So we were very fortunate that towards the end of 2022, we were approached by Coronation Street, who let us know that they were thinking about having a storyline centered around MND on the soap. So the character who you'll see in the image on the left there, Paul Foreman, he started to experience symptoms in March last year. And then after being referred to a neurologist on screen, he was diagnosed with MND in May 2023. So when Paul's emotional journey with MND became a central storyline on Coronation Street, we gained a very, very powerful platform to reach an audience who may never have heard of the disease before. Around 6 million people watch Coronation Street, so that's a huge audience that we're watching a character living through an MND diagnosis and then progressing through the disease on screen. And it was around an 18-month period that this storyline continued for. So over this time, those people gained a better understanding of MND and the impact that it can have on the person living with the disease and the people around them. So that's why we decided to launch a campaign to leverage that increased awareness, because it was an opportunity like we'd never had before. So we launched a campaign, and this saw us do our first TV adverts in over a decade. And we decided to run those during the ad breaks of the Coronation Street storyline, specifically when there were key moments around MND happening in the episodes. And the aim of that was to turn the fictional storyline on Coronation Street into reality, and share real stories of people living with and affected by MND, as well as the support that the association can provide. So this campaign included the TV ads like I just mentioned, but also out-of-home advertising, PR moments, as well as digital marketing, which we're going to talk a little bit more about now because that played a huge role in the campaign.
Absolutely, yeah. So Torchbox was brought in pretty early into this campaign planning process, and we were really pleased with sort of ways we were able to interact with the other agencies as well. So Good Agency were the ones who developed the creative approach here, and we fed in on that TV ad creative to sort of like say, okay, how might this work on Meta? And okay, you want to add a search term as a call to action. Our SEO team can advise on what is the best search term to use there. And then we had obviously MI Media were doing the TV ad buying spots and the sort of PR activity around it. And so we were able to sort of review how those sort of spikes in engagement matched up with online activity in our measurement process there. And then we also worked with Manifesto, who were the developer agency, who were creating the landing pages for this activity. And we were sort of supporting them with, making sure that we sort of made recommendations on what pages were needed for this activity. Both like, okay, we need a page about Paul's story, and we also need a page for like converting people. And then we also sort of checked visibility on those conversion points. And then finally, we also sort of, from a measurement perspective, recommended the KPIs that we were going to use for the different phases of activity and sort of joined those up with how the other channels were being measured. And that was a really important part of what we did. From the paid media perspective, this is a very large part of the campaign. We sort of split our strategic approach into 3 different types of activity. We had an awareness campaign where the objective was to ask people to watch the video. And we were trying to reach this audience of Coronation Street watchers, so using interests that sort of aligned with those demographics. We were also using Meta's Advantage Plus targeting, so AI selecting audiences that it thought would be appropriate, and then using our similar supported demographics for MND Association, but excluding people who had already interacted with us to sort of ensure that we were making the most of this awareness activity among people who had not already got an existing connection to us. We then also ran consideration activities. So the ask was to sign up with an email address to show your support, and then follow that up with donation ask. But you might think that we would run with these campaigns sort of one after the other, but in our experience, people actually tend to move through this journey quite quickly. So we ran all 3 types of activity simultaneously. We sort of just started with larger budget to the awareness phase at the beginning, and then sort of moved it through to give more consideration in the middle, and then more to conversion at the end of the activity. And we also moved audiences between these different strands of activity, starting with the sort of cold Coronation Street audience in the awareness activity, and then moving them through the other phases, sort of figuring, even if they have not clicked on an ad, by the time we've been running these ads for a little while, they've definitely seen one, so they're probably ready for the next stage of the ask there.
Yeah, it was really interesting to be able to test that kind of approach as well, of having different phases of activity. I think given our limited budgets in the past, we've tended to focus more around that conversion phase to get people to make a donation or sign up for an event, for example. But it was great to see the consideration phase being tested, because that's not something that we've really done before. And that was one of the areas that was hugely successful for us. So yeah, I know you've got some slides on the impact of that next.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, all 3 of these phases were very successful, really. We achieved over 40 million impressions overall in the campaign, and 52% of those came from digital channels, the rest coming from the TV ads and the out-of-home activity, which did smash the targets we were expecting to achieve. We achieved over 7,000 new email signups. So yeah, that's massive for the sort of status quo from MND Association, and 94% of those came from paid activity on digital, on Meta, on Performance Max, on paid search. So it's really crucial for that particular warming up stage of the campaign. And then when it came to the donation ask, we generated over £145,000 of revenue, the majority of which came from email, organic, and from paid search as well. So I think it really showed the importance of the journey. It was very gratifying to see, this has worked, going from awareness to consideration to conversion. Because if you just sort of focused in on the final stage there, you're sort of missing what came before. Okay, you got a lot of conversions through email, but a lot of those emails came through the previous paid activity. And it was really sort of gratifying to see, like, okay, here's the big picture of the impact that we can have. What's the reaction been internally, Amy?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, the primary objective of this campaign was always around awareness and reaching an audience of people who may never have heard of MND before. So we even saw things like search terms around what are the first signs and symptoms of MND, appearing really highly. So yeah, there was lots of great stats that came from this. And I think even though the primary objective was awareness, you can see from the stats on this slide that we also benefited from email sign-ups. So now we've got a whole host of people that we can contact via email and hopefully turn into longer term supporters of the association. And obviously we also raised £145,000 in income too, which was great to see. And I think these stats have been really important for us to then be able to report internally, especially to those senior stakeholders, like I mentioned before, who hadn't necessarily seen the impact of digital before. So being able to have these really, really impressive stats and being able to share those upwards has been really helpful too.
Amazing. Yeah, there definitely seems to be a lot of appetite for digital going into the next year of planning. And it feels like, yeah, we've sort of really got to a new sort of place in terms of like how the organization feels about digital.
Absolutely. And then it helps us make the case for doing campaigns like this moving forwards as well. So yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. That's sort of it for the presentation part, but I believe we have questions, Lisa.
We do have some questions. So first of all, talking about the shared campaign calendar, Laura's asked, how do you make sure that everyone is checking a calendar like this? Because she's tried creating something similar, but it's been a massive struggle to get other people to actually check it and use it.
So the calendar that we created wasn't one that we shared wider with the rest of the organisation. It was very much owned by the digital team, and in particular that one person that we decided to be the central owner. So it wasn't necessarily a case of making sure that people were checking it. It was that we had that overall insight into what was being fed into that, and then that was shared with Torchbox. So it was more something that was managed and owned by the team rather than shared wider, which I imagine makes that a little bit easier than getting lots of different teams and people to be feeding into that, if that makes sense.
It does. And that answers another question that Louise asked, was about how many people do you actually share that calendar with as well? Somebody else has asked, did you have a tool to help you build the Coronation Street audience?
Oh, in terms of how we built the Coronation Street audiences, so we had some insights already from, I believe it was MI Media, who sort of provided here are your classic demographics for Coronation Street watchers. And then we also sort of already had insights from Motor Neuron Disease Association about here are our typical demographics for who our supporters are. And so we do quite a lot of manual audience building at Torchbox. So within the platforms that we've got, Meta, Google Search, we are doing our own research into how we might reach those demographics. We tend to include both some very broad audiences of just everyone in this region who is the right age, with sort of AI targeting over the top to try and reach everyone who might work. But then we do also experiment with more specific interest audiences. So in the case of Coronation Street, it was people who have engaged with ITV content or Coronation Street specifically. And sort of we also include some demographic content, parents and grandparents tend to be sort of very distinct in terms of their behavior. So we do often break them out into a separate audience. And then when it comes to audience building for other platforms like Google and other search platforms, we tend to use a combination of SEO research, which includes a lot of tools that they use there. I'm sure everyone's sort of familiar with like any kind of keyword planner, Google Search Console, but also some paid platforms like Ahrefs is something we've used quite a lot in the past to sort of build out big keywords lists and find where the potential for traffic might be, but also using our own data from previous Google Ads activity. The Google Ad Grants account is a really great resource for finding like where is the potential to reach an audience. So yeah, we don't use any sort of particular one tool. We combine a lot of different tools together.
It sounds like the combination worked well in this case. And then Ben, a couple of questions from Ben. Did you find that the donation ask worked well in paid social, because they found it quite hard to get direct donations from social?
This is a pretty big problem, I would say, across the sector in terms of getting donations from paid social. It did work for us, I think, because we'd done that massive amount of groundwork and we had that very high level of awareness, and we'd taken people along that consideration journey. So we did see donations coming in from paid social, but it was less than 20% of the overall donations for the campaign. So yeah, definitely much more coming from other channels, with paid social being more of a warm-up channel. Paid social drove the majority of those email signups.
Brilliant, thank you. And Ben also said super work. I'd just like to say at the beginning of his question. And he also asked, do you have an ongoing stewardship journey in place for the 7K email supporters?
Yeah, so we did have a automated journey that we set up while the campaign was live. So when somebody showed their support and gave us their email address, we took them on a journey of around 6 emails. So that was thanking people for showing their support, letting them know about the Coronation Street storyline, and then introducing that donation ask. So there was an automated journey that we'd set up, which was over a period of weeks, that supporters would receive those emails and then hopefully end up leaving a donation to the association off the back of it. So it wasn't just Meta that we were using for those donation asks, we were using the email journey as well. Then once people had made a donation to the association, they'd then be fed into our usual stewardship journey when somebody makes a donation in general. But you make a really good point, because we now have 7,000 people who we weren't necessarily aware of before. And one of the things that we're thinking about at the moment is how do we do some more tailored communication to those people, and with the hope of turning them into longer term supporters of the association. So that's something that we're thinking about at the moment.
From a paid media perspective as well, we can consider sort of including that audience split out on their own in a campaign, so we can see how they perform and get a good idea of their like lifetime value.
Great advice, thank you. We also have a question. Have you got any tips for people achieving this kind of change but with lower budgets than you had?
That's a really good question. Yeah, because obviously like both budgets and opportunity, like not everyone's going to get a storyline on a major national soap. And so like, yeah, how can you achieve this sort of change without like this sort of, yeah, very, very large scale activity? I'd say that I think like the planning aspect of it, the creating a campaign calendar, the having a central owner, but getting input from other teams is something that could be applied pretty universally. And I guess from the sort of like, I'd say also like the measurement planning perspective, you know, knowing what success looks like for you and exactly how you're measuring it can sort of help save money in terms of, okay, what tracking do we actually need to set up, rather than sort of going scattershot and collecting all the data you've got and trying to analyze everything. Agreeing in advance what you care about, I think, is a really good way to focus in and be efficient with the way you're using your time and your money. Amy, anything you would give in terms of?
I was just going to add that if you don't have the budgets for doing a larger piece of user research like we've been doing at the moment, is to speak to your colleagues and speak to people internally. So I mentioned earlier on that we spoke to our MND Connect helpline, and they're people who are having conversations with the people that we support day to day, or even your supported care teams who are speaking on the phone to people who may be leaving a donation to you. Have those conversations with people internally internally, because they may be able to offer some insight that that you might be able to get and already have internally as well. So make the most of those connections. And one of the things that we did in that planning exercise was just to make the most of meetings that are already in the diary. I think the question was more around budgets, but we also know that people's time is of the essence as well. So are there existing meetings that you have in the diary with those teams where you can start having some of those conversations to plan a bit more strategically? So they'd be some of the tips I'd give.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that's all of the questions. So I'll just say thank you very much to Iona and Amy as well for hosting it today. And hello, Babs, who said, hi, Amy, love this campaign, no question. Just a huge hello from everyone at MS Society.
Oh, hi, Babs.
That's nice as well. So thank you everybody for joining us as well. I will send a follow-up email with the deck and the recording. If you've got any other questions, then let me know. We're also hosting on the 20th of November, we're hosting an AI for nonprofits webinar. So we'll be looking at how you can use AI to speed up innovation and speed up your projects. And we've got some really good case studies in that with real life examples, not just theory. So I'll send you a link to that as well. But that's all from us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later.